So, Ben, thanks for coming out here and taking the time to talk with the audience. Let's start with a bit of the background before Ernst.
Yeah, so as William mentioned, I started out in finance, and then I was kind of fortunate enough to go and work at Her Majesty's Treasury, which is the UK Treasury Department. And I was there during the financial crisis, worked on the UK's response to failing banks like Northern Rock. And it was kind of a really interesting time and actually got me thinking about what was the real problems with what we call high street banking in the UK, or kind of Main Street banking in the US. And that is what led to kind of wanting to work on Earnest to try to use technology to build a kind of better consumer finance experience. We were lucky enough to kind of build that company for a while, and we had some success there. We weren't able to change banking because banking is still broken. So unfortunately, we kind of failed to take that the whole distance. But we'll talk a little bit about that.
So you had an idea. How did you know you were ready to pursue it?
Yeah, so I think, certainly this is, I think the experience, and we can talk about this too, the experience the first time starting a company versus the second time is very different for me. But I think for the first time, Lewis and I were starting to have conversations about starting a business, and, kind of Lewis really wanted to focus in on this idea around consumer financial services, and he knew that I'd worked around that area kind of with my work at the Treasury, and we started to really kind of talk about, with the simple question, like if you were going to build a bank from scratch, what would it look like? And, we really tried to focus in on what was our kind of tip of the spear, what was our point of attack for that. And, we spent months talking through that. The idea that became Earnest crystallized from those conversations. And what happens there is the next process where you actually try to persuade yourself this is a terrible idea. And so we spent probably 2 months thinking of all of the reasons why this business would fail. And, because we're slightly naive, we couldn't come up with those reasons. And so you kind of, ultimately you find yourself, you've got to back yourself in life. If you've spent the time trying to think about why this idea isn't going to work, and you can't really come up with a good idea, reason why that is, then it's kind of, you've got to push on open doors in life. Opportunities don't come around that often, and it was from that we kind of dived in and went out there and tried to persuade some people to give us some money to attack the problem.
Interesting. I have a couple of follow-up questions to this, because I think I meet lots of potential founders out there, and they get the idea, they've sort of battle tested it before, mentally, they can't see the problems, and then they stall because of one of two things: either they don't know if they have the right skills to do it, or they don't know how to get capital. So how did you know you guys could pull it off, or,
we didn't know we could pull it off.
Okay.
I think ultimately, lots of people, actually, there are tons of people that come and say, I want to come and work for you, and one of the reasons I want to come work for you is because I want to start a company one day, and I want to learn how to do that. And actually, my response to that is always, the best way to figure out how to start a company is to start a company. You learn so fast. It's really the only environment that you do learn how to start a company. And so, I think that, you do have to have, the appetite for that risk, and really be kind of excited about going for it. But I think that there's no time like the present for these things.
Cool. So just do it, as Nike would say. And then I assume you needed capital. It sounds like you went and searched for capital. How did you go about doing that for the first round?
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate in a number of different ways. First of all, we were both, kind of a little bit more experienced in our careers. Lewis, he had moved to Silicon Valley out of business school and had been working at Andreessen Horowitz and had built a set of relationships through that. I think that, obviously that helped, but I think that going and getting and building those relationships with investors as early as possible, even perhaps before you have something that you want to be funded, is, I think, kind of part of the process. And I think that's one of the things that things like TechVancouver can be incredibly helpful for, is like, if you think entrepreneurship is something that you have this burning passion to do, and I'm not sure I'd recommend it actually, but that kind of coming and being part of the community and getting to know investors, I think is a critical part of that.
So we'll get back to why you shouldn't do it in a bit. But tell, so now situations, you've got an idea, you've tested, you've raised some money. What did you do next?
yeah, I mean, kind of, you've got to hire that initial team of people to go on it because, as Lewis likes to say, great products get built by great teams. And so you have to go and find people who are, passionate and mission-driven and excited about going on this journey with you because it's going to be a tough journey. And, that was our next step. We kind of slightly differently from the second time round had starting the hiring process at the same time that we'd started the fundraising process. And so, that fundraising process ended up taking, about 3 months to close. And we were able to bring on our CTO, our kind of biz ops person, kind of, and 2 data scientists, kind of straight out the gate on the kind of the week after we, closed the funding. And, we kept hiring from there. We had a couple more engineers, design leader to be part of the company. And it was with that initial group of kind of 10 people that we then attacked, kind of building a kind of, I like to think that you've got to try and build the smallest possible thing that will give you signal as to whether your idea is going to work.
And when you're recruiting that initial team, is it a focus on skill set, experience, culture? Because in our conversation, you seem really focused on culture.
Yeah,
so
I think culture's been a huge part of how we think about building companies. Actually, just in that process of ideation and kind of really committing personally to starting Earnest, I read Tony Hsieh's book, Delivering Happiness, which kind of had a huge impact on how I thought about company building. And, so building people that were going to be, and it's very easy for culture to feel like I'm going to hire people who are just like me. I think that's the dangerous trap that you can fall into by focusing on culture. Actually, you really need to figure out how am I going to find people who are going to be additive to the culture that I want to build? How am I going to find people who are actually going to push the company in a positive way forward? And so culture was a really big part of that. And I think one of the things that's really different about how we're thinking about our second company versus our first company was that, as first-time entrepreneurs, big kind of, we've read Lean Startup, we've read 0 to 1, we feel like we know that you've got to be scrappy and lean. And so, we tried to hire a group of people who were kind of, just about ready to make the step. And I think that was great for about a third of those people, and they were ready to make the step, and they did make that step, and they were huge contributors. But equally, there were a set of people who kind of weren't able to make that. And we, by taking a risk on the talent you hire, then kind of you have to live with that. I mean, I think that we've been lucky first time round that kind of we were able to secure funding. We've been lucky the second time round that we have again been able to secure funding, and but this time we have a huge focus on hiring the very best talent that we can find in the areas that we can find them. So we're looking to have this small but absolutely amazing team of people who are able to kind of work in a very intense, agile way to deliver kind of an excellent product. And that's kind of one of the changes we're making.
So I'm going to take you a step back, because
Sure.
One part of your team that you've had consistent is your co-founder.
Yes.
And you're not even from the same country.
We're not from the same country.
So how did you find each other?
So Lewis and I, we met actually at a wedding in New Hampshire in 2005. And we were both at the time dating cousins of the bride at this wedding.
Not the same cousin.
No, different cousins.
Just making sure.
Different cousins. Lewis actually is now married to his cousin.
Okay.
I'm not married to my cousin. So we met at this wedding. We were kind of both kind of part of the family group.
Yeah.
And so didn't know tons of people at the wedding, but were both I was living in New York at the time, and we kind of hit it off and found kind of kindred spirits in each other, and spent much of that weekend hanging out. And then when we got back to New York, kind of really kind of spent a bunch of time together, kind of really kind of felt that we were on a very similar wavelength, that our minds worked at a really similar speed to each other. And then actually kind of not long after that, Lewis and his now wife, which, if you credit it, is Louise, introduced me to my wife. So actually, Lewis and his wife introduced me to my wife, and we got married 10 years ago now, and
4 kids now.
And I've had 4 kids over that period of time, which has been fun, and continues to be fun. And so kind of we got very close over a decade of knowing each other, and then it was then kind of Lewis has found himself at Andreessen Horowitz. He has kind of very quickly realized that that kind of talking to founders is really frustrating, because when you tell them something about their idea, about how you think it could be improved, they totally ignore you. And the only real solution to this is to go and start your own company. And so kind of Lewis called me up and he's like, I think I've got to start a company. Let's start talking about that. And that was kind of really the genesis of our entrepreneurial journey.
Cool. So now you've told us how you found your co-founder.
Yeah.
You got your capital. You got a team together. So what happened in this first company? Like, high level, because I don't know how many people here know the story.
Yeah.
So just
I mean,
tell us a bit about
it was very exciting.
tell us what it was, first of all.
So
what
Earnest, we were, our main product, and the main product that Earnest continues to have, is student loan refinancing. As I'm sure you all know, that student loans are a big problem in the United States, and we were looking to kind of refinance people's student loans to lower rates to help people get out from under those loans as quickly as possible. We also offer personal loans, mortgages, kind of a number of other financial products that we built over the kind of over the 4 years that we worked on it together. We raised a little bit of money. We hired a small team of people. We launched a product. We started to get that product into the hands of our customers. We learned very quickly, and that we started with a personal loan product, but we learned very quickly that actually the key pain point for the customers we were serving was their student loans. So we very quickly launched that second product. That product kind of caught fire instantly, and kind of product market fit being the appropriate phrase for that. We struck gold on that instantly, and we had maybe.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. So just give us some context. What does struck gold mean? Like, was this like one refinancing a week, one run?
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
So when we launched, this was some time ago, so I'm going to approximately this is true. So when we launched it, we'd done $1 million of personal loans when we launched our student loan product. We did $1 million in the first day of student loans. We had done 10 million by the end of that month. We did 20 million the following month, 30 million the month after that, 45 million the month after that. We got to $80 million within 6 months of launching. We were growing at 30+% MRR month over month. And this is the thing. People often ask, kind of, how do you know you've got product market fit? I mean, you've got product market fit because the product is flying off the shelves so fast that your company is completely broken, and it's like a deeply joyful, deeply horrendous like state of being, which we're all seeking, so we're very fortunate that kind of we spent the time with that initial set of customers that we served with a product and realized that we had served them the wrong product. But we were able to learn from that. We were able to serve them with a product they did want, and very quickly kind of hit on that. Now, one of the problems with lending people money is the better at it you are, the more money you need. And so we went from needing, kind of tens of millions of dollars to needing, hundreds of millions of dollars. And that, ultimately we raised a bunch of equity. We borrowed, we had $500 million worth of credit lines from Goldman Sachs and Barclays and Credit Suisse, and we did over $1 billion of bond issuance, and it wasn't stopping. And ultimately, that's kind of where we kind of hit the point where the acquisition kind of came about. So we found ourselves continuing to grow. We knew that we wanted to grow the business from, we got it to $100 million a month, and we knew we kind of wanted to take it to $200 million a month the next year. And so we went to the board and we said, okay, well, we're going to need to raise another $100 or $200 million of equity to kind of to increase the size of the balance sheet so that we can increase the debt capacity of the business so that we can kind of do all these loans. And the board were kind of like, that's a terrifying number. We should explore exiting the business. And, to be honest, Lewis and I were not very excited about that. We continue to believe that there was still a lot of runway in the business, and we would love to still be doing it in some ways. We had no ambitions to sell our business, but we ran a process where we both looked for investment and we looked for kind of interest in owning the company. And one of the things that I learned to say over and over again to members of the team when asked about it at Earnest was that the problem with running an auction is an auction only has one winner. Like, there's no choice at the end of an auction. And so we ran a process, and Lewis and I were desperately hoping that the best option would be someone coming in and being willing to write a $200 million equity check for a huge valuation, and that everyone could get excited about it. But ultimately, the winner of the auction was an acquisition.
So interesting. Just explain this auction to me, because was it purely based on who's giving you the highest valuation?
No, I mean it isn't about valuation. Obviously, an equity valuation today versus a bid for the whole company today are not apples to apples comparisons. And so, clearly, raising money at a $400 million valuation versus selling the company at $400 million, like selling it at $400 million is
cash in
value of money in the future, risk, all these things. So there was and you kind of those discussions in the board are a little bit around kind of how do you balance, making a judgment between those two things. But ultimately we ran an auction, and the board considered that the best option coming out of that auction was the acquisition.
And how long ago was that?
So we realized that we needed money. And we're having those conversations at the end of 2016, and we ended up closing the sale of the business in November of 2017. So, that process then took a year and is one I don't recommend. It is incredibly distracting. I was actually having this conversation with an entrepreneur friend of mine who, he's a second-time entrepreneur. He's sold a business, so he knows exactly how painful selling a business is. And a very big, well-known tech company had kind of thrown a number at him as being like, but I will buy your second company. And I was just like, you have to ignore them, because he's only at like 12 people right now. And I was just like, if you spend 6 months working on this acquisition and it doesn't happen, you won't have any company left afterwards. It's like a draining, stressful, kind of long thing to do. And we were lucky enough that we had gained enough critical mass that we were able to go through that process and be able to complete it. But I certainly don't recommend it.
Okay, so you sold the company, you're starting a new one.
Yes.
So what takeaways, what lessons, and what are you applying to the second one?
Yeah, I think that there's obviously a huge number of lessons learned here. I mean, one of those was coming back to this point where we wanted to go out and raise more equity and keep growing the business, and ultimately our investors were they were acting in absolutely their best interest. And I think that when they said they wanted to sell the business, and I think that's one of the things you have to realize is that everyone is going to act in their own best interest, and that is absolutely fine. And so what you need to do is ensure that all of the stakeholders, and that's not just your investors, that's also, if you have big customers, it's also your executive team and your leadership team kind of in the company. Everyone has to have their interests as aligned as possible. Because any lack of alignment is going to cause tension to grow in what can be a very fragile kind of thing, your startup. And that tension, I think, can rip it apart. And so, we found ultimately that, we had kind of built a group of stakeholders that, when the rubber hit the road, didn't quite want the same things as each other, and that led to the outcome that it led to. And so this time we are, especially when it comes to kind of seeking investment, very focused on really making sure that we're as aligned as possible. And that's the same when we're kind of building the initial team, that everyone is on exactly the same page, that we kind of know that we're going on a long journey, that we're trying to do something significant, that we're not looking to do something quick.
Any other? That's number one. So alignment. Give me your top 3 hits. I'm curious.
Okay.
So 2 more.
Absolutely. I think that the second thing I mentioned before was I think we've really figured out that we want to hire the very best people that we can, and that actually cost isn't really that important in that. You need to find the very best people you can. You need to make them feel rewarded, and you need to make them feel kind of owners in the mission. And that's something that we've been kind of incredibly focused on, trying to find the very best people that we can, and we're kind of super excited. we decided very early on that we wanted to build the technical team here in Vancouver. We have hired, 2 absolutely amazing engineers here in Vancouver who, both here tonight. And so I know one of them, Justice Gray, is here in the crowd.
It's hard to see with the light right in our
over
face.
here. And Justice is there, and he'll be around after to chat. And Vinod Ramakrishnan is over there. Both of them absolutely fantastic. Justice has worked across the startup ecosystem here in Vancouver for quite a long time. Vinod actually moved up here about 4 years ago with Zenefits to open their Vancouver office. He's hired 50 engineers up here, absolutely amazing team. We're incredibly fortunate to have both of them coming to help us build what we hope will become the very best engineering team in Vancouver. And so, we're all first name at rocketplace.com. So I'm Ben at Rocketplace. There's Lewis at Rocketplace, Justice at Rocketplace, Vinod at Rocketplace, and Zaya, our kind of ops lead as well, is here. She's in the Bay Area with Lewis and I. She's Zaya at Rocketplace as well.
Cool. I have more questions, but I do want to open it up to the audience.
Sure.
William, are we going to be running the mics, or you want me to run it?
No,
Okay.
What does Rocketplace do?
Yeah, so we kind of...
Repeat the question.
What does Rocketplace do? Good question. So we are in stealth mode, but I will share a little bit about what we're doing. We are building a fintech-enabled marketplace for professional services. We would kind of happy to chat about that one-on-one, but as I say, we are keeping it. Our philosophy is that there is nothing to shout about until you've got something to put in the customer's hands.
Yeah, so what sort of alignment issues, you said you had alignment issues in the beginning when you were going to sell out. How much do you think that, how much on a monetary value did you think that affected your final seller price?
Well, so I don't know that it affected the final sale price particularly. What it did was it caused us to pull the trigger on selling the company at a time when not only did I not want to do it, but I didn't think actually was in the best long-term interests of everyone. I believed that we had more mileage to go and that we could have continued to build this and had a different outcome later down the road. So I don't think it necessarily caused a great degree of loss of value within the context of the acquisition.
I'm wondering, what is your definition of the best talent that you're looking for? Is it specifically technical skills or alignment to your vision?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that one of the reasons why we're incredibly excited about building a team here in Vancouver is because we believe that this is not only a place with absolutely excellent technical talent, but there are people who are ready to be passionate, to be missionaries for the product that they're working on, and that I think it's a combination of those two things. We want people who are really excited about the mission that we are pursuing together, but also who are absolutely top of their field.
How do you balance your time working on the product versus developing the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason to have a co-founder is that there is a few more hands to move these forward. I mean, although we both work across everything that we work across, Lewis is a little bit more focused on developing the product, and I am a little bit more focused on developing the business. But as I say, one of the things we didn't talk about was that, the reason to have a co-founder. I wouldn't, as I said, I'm not sure I would deeply recommend company building as a pursuit. But if you are going to do it, do not do it on your own. I think it's a deeply emotionally challenging journey that you're going to go on, and having someone to go on that journey with, I think, is critically important from a mental well-being perspective. But ultimately, what a co-founder does is it gives you a single thread of conversation that runs through the entirety of a business. And when those challenges inevitably come up, you don't have the time or the bandwidth to read someone in. So no matter how smart your investor or partner or mum is, you can't explain to them all the problems that are going on in your business and hope that they're going to give you that kind of sage wisdom. Ultimately, the two of you and your co-founder, kind of are going to have all of that context, and you're going to be able to sit down and work through those problems. And I think that's what the benefits of a co-founder.
So you talk about finding people with alignment. So obviously you had to go through a lot of people to sort of find individuals with the right fit. How do you balance that with staying in stealth mode?
Yeah, so I think that we're only looking to hire a team of 10 people. We started with the 2 of us, so only 8 more. And we are absolutely happy to talk kind of freely about what we're working on with kind of people who are excited about joining the team. So, there's, of course, we certainly wouldn't want anyone to join the team who wasn't kind of fully across and had every opportunity to kind of challenge and test, everything about what we're working on. It's just that we're not out there. I've talked more about, if you can believe, I've talked more about what we're working on here than any of us have talked about publicly before.
Cool. A couple more questions. It's hands up here.
You talked earlier about books that you'd been reading. Delivering Happiness, I think, was one.
Sure.
Do you have any other professional or books or authors that you're into that have definitely helped you to become the entrepreneur that you are?
So there are obviously a ton of great books out there. I think that probably my favorite, and actually Lewis just bought a copy of it and gave it to Zaya today. I think one of the most readable and I think most real books on business building is Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So if you haven't read that, I would absolutely look at it. It's highly entertaining. It's I think it's the only kind of can't put it down business book that I have ever read. It's funny, it's tragic. It tells you an awful lot about how horrible and hard it is building businesses. And, unfortunately, a lot of it rings very true, I think, to anyone who has been through the process of business building. So if you're thinking about building a business, read that, and that'll tell you a little bit about why you probably shouldn't.
Do we have a last question up there, William? Yeah, right here.
Fantastic. So I had a quick question. So with regards to, obviously you're from the UK, Lewis is from the US. Did you ever have a decision-making process whereby which you chose North America over Europe?
Yeah, so we absolutely did, and we had a different decision-making process about why we chose Silicon Valley versus somewhere not Silicon Valley, and I think that, first of all, we were building a financial services company with a financial product, and one of the realities of that is that that's a highly regulated industry. We decided, not only because the banking system is more broken in the US than it is in most places, but also because the US represents one of the largest economic kind of single regulatory environments in the English-speaking world, which is the only language I speak, unfortunately. And so it became doing this for the US market and therefore in the US was an obvious choice. Lewis was living in Silicon Valley at the time, and that was an influence. But we actually spent quite a lot of time in Boston, kind of where Lewis had spent some time at school, and thinking about that as a option. It obviously made some sense if I was going to try and spend more time with my family and friends in Europe to be on the East Coast. But ultimately, we believed at the time, and actually this has kind of changed, we believe, quite a lot over the last 6 years, and one of the reasons why we're not doing the same thing again, we believe that building a tech team in Silicon Valley was, in San Francisco specifically, actually, was going to be the best way to accelerate our company. And we now don't believe that, and we believe that building it in Vancouver is.
Excellent. I'll just have one follow-up question, so I lied. So you're building the tech team up here. What are you building in San Francisco? I think you have 2 offices. Maybe can you explain a bit?
Yeah, we actually don't have any offices just yet. Although I was touring real estate yesterday, and I've been touring real estate in Palo Alto as well. And we are hopeful that within the next month or 2, I will have 2 offices. I think that Lewis and I are based in Palo Alto, and we are up here every other week. And that's a commitment that we have made to ourselves, we've made to the team, that is going to continue through the life of the business. We are building the engineering team up here. We are kind of, Lewis and I are down there, and we are going to be focused on, kind of the customer-facing elements of kind of building the business development, kind of fundraising, all of those sorts of things will continue to live in Silicon Valley, and Zaya's come on board to help us across that side of the business. We're also hiring a design leader. We have a number of great candidates that we're kind of looking at. Some of those candidates are here in Vancouver, some of those candidates in the Bay Area. I think that we are looking to find the very best person there. I think it would make a lot of sense to hire them here in Vancouver, and we may well. If we did hire them in Silicon Valley, then I think that we would be pushing that person very hard to hire their second and third designers up here. And the same goes for product. We're not focused on hiring a product leader right now. Actually, we think that it is quite important that the founders own product early on in a company. But I think that when it comes time to be hiring PMs to work with a growing engineering team, I think that it makes sense to have those co-located as well. So I think we envisage, and obviously those things change as you learn, as you scale, but we envisage hiring those core technical functions, and ultimately there is a data component to what we're building, and when we have accrued enough data to be able to meaningfully start to work the kind of the serious kind of data science parts of our vision, kind of also hope to hire and build out a data science team up here as well.
Cool. I'm sure we have more questions, and they can just reach out to you. So it was Ben at rocketplace.com.
That's absolutely right.
Cool. And can we just get a round of applause for Ben for taking the time?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.